My name is Max Banfield. Welcome to my talk. Today I'll be discussing my experience with the slip disc injury that occurred in about March 2012. It's about 5 years ago. Essentially, what had happened is I had a long couch in my home, and it was so long that it was cluttering up the room to such an extent that quite often I'd kick my foot against it or trip over it. And so one day I decided to replace it with a smaller and narrower chair. And in order to do that, I had to remove it from the house. And that involved an awkward process of getting it out through the door and then placing one end of the lounge on a wheeled trolley. A friend of mine held that in position, and I held the other end of the couch and moved it out to the street and put a for sale sign on it. Within a day or so it hadn't sold, and so I decided I'd have to dispose of it some other way. So I had to bring it back into my property. And in order to do that, I needed to carry it. Unfortunately, at that time, a neighbour and friend of mine was coming by, and he volunteered to help me. And this is a rough picture, a rough drawing of that lounge chair. Very long, maybe over 6 foot long. And he grabbed that end, and I took hold of this end. So in order to stop it from tumbling as I carried it, I placed one hand here on the front lower part, one hand here at the top back part. So I had to carry it at an awkward angle like that, backwards. This is a diagram of a fence, and basically the lounge was on the far side, and I had to carry it backwards there. While my friend was at this end, I was on this end, carrying it backwards. And then we had to do a 90-degree turn to come into my property. And as I got a few yards into my property, probably 3/4 of the length of that lounge, I felt a twinge in my neck. I was carrying it like this. I don't know if you can see. That's better. Carrying it like this, walking backwards at that awkward angle, and I felt a twinge in my neck. Only lasted a second or two, and on a pain scale it's probably only 2 out of 10, and it wasn't really a pain, it was just a twinging sensation, and only lasted perhaps a couple of seconds, and with some sort of residual soreness just shortly afterwards. But I therefore got another couple of yards in, because I was a bit concerned about this twinge, I dropped the couch. Now, after resting for about a minute or two, I picked it up again with one arm in the front left-hand side and one arm at the top back of the backrest at the top of the lounge. And I was walking backwards another few yards, and then we reached this point, and I had to come back, carry it back inside the fence on my property. This represents a fence. Now, that meant I had to turn that way, 90 degrees, and then gradually move around until I reached that point and then drop the lounge. So then I went inside and sat in a chair, watch a bit of TV. And the big problem was, about a few minutes or maybe half an hour later, in all probability, I can't say this for sure because it might have been even the next morning, but I'm pretty sure that it was about 20 minutes later, while I was sitting in that chair, that I started to feel a pain in my neck. Now, there are lots of different types of pain. And in order to understand anything, you really have to be precise. And that's why in medical research. You have to have very precise mathematical calculations and very precise detailed images. Well, you also have to have very precise descriptions of pain if you want to understand them. And so this was not the type of pain you get when you cut your finger. It was not the type of pain you get when you hit your thumb with a hammer. It was just a very strong, powerful pain. Like if you're pushing your knuckle into a part of your skin somewhere, really hard. But as you can appreciate, I can do that. It's quite painful, but you can tolerate it. So it's not that big a deal, but the problem was it got more and more powerful until it was downright agony. And as a guide, I think I'm being understating it when I was getting up to level 8 or 9 on the pain scale. And there's still nothing to be concerned about because, as you can see, I used to be a gymnast and jumping off a 10-foot high unicycle. No one else could do it. But I used to give you an example, I used to run at full speed for about 20 or 30 yards, bounce off the end of a 6-foot springboard, fly about 10 feet in the air, and sometimes miss the guy I was supposed to be using as a support, fall, put my foot on the top of the 5-foot horse and then fall onto the ground, get up and do it again. To give you another example, if you've been in gymnastics, you'll know what I mean if you've been doing it for any years. I did gymnastics for about 10 years. I only ever had one injury that stopped me. In about the middle, when I was about 17, and that was jumping off this 10-foot high unicycle. I'll tell you about that later maybe. But on one occasion, I was travelling at full speed, jumped onto the end of the springboard and slipped and missed and bounced head first into the 5-foot high wooden horse. Needless to say, the horse didn't move. And it was a type of pain that you get in gymnastics all the time. And 5 minutes later, I'm up doing it again. Because if you don't do that, you'd soon give up gymnastics. You don't do gymnastics for 10 years if you're the type of guy who gives up because of things like that. So, but this pain was very powerful. Pressure pain, and it was relentless. The pain that I got about probably a half an hour after I felt the twinge in my neck, and it got worse and worse. Now, in the overall scheme of things, a pain usually goes away. Even when you bang your thumb with a hammer, it might be painful when you hit it. It might be painful a few seconds or even a minute or two after, but gradually it eases off. Well, this pain didn't. It just kept at this very powerful, intense level. And so I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. It probably lasts only a half an hour, because most pains do. But an hour went by and I was still in pain. This was an unrelenting pain. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm also not the type of guy to go rushing off to a doctor. Because generally speaking, as you know, if you haven't got blood spurting out in the artery and a broken bone in 6 places, they're a bit sceptical of it. So I wasn't going to go to a doctor just because of this intense level 9 pain. First thing I did was to go into another room and get an old packet of Panadol. I very rarely use medication to treat my problems because I've had experience in the past where the side effects are downside worse than the problem you're trying to treat. But there's this Panadol left over from maybe a year or two earlier, and I took a tablet. Total waste of time, didn't relieve the pain. So within about 10 minutes, I took another one. Still a total waste of time. Now an hour and a half went by, and I'm still in pain. And I'm thinking, it's got to go away in an hour or two. So I went down the shop and I bought something at the local supermarket a bit stronger than aspirin. Total waste of time. So later that day, I went down to the chemist for something a bit more powerful than the painkillers you get at the supermarket. Took it. Total waste of time. This pain was just relentless. So I'd have a lot of difficulty sleeping because of this pain, by the next day, I'm wondering what to do. In the next week or so, I went to my cupboard and I found these old cushions that are sort of rounded, like in a horseshoe shape, to put that on my neck. It didn't help. So I went down the chemist and I bought one of these gel packs where you heat them up. So I put the heated gel pack on. That didn't help. Within a week, I calculated that I'd spent $120 on various medications to try and get rid of this pain. I've also had, as most people have over the years, neck problems for one reason or another of a reasonably mild but annoying nature. And so I've been to the massage centres in shopping centres. And in general, I find them to be very good. What they do is they massage your muscle to try and get of any inflammation and congested material in the muscle to circulate through your bloodstream. And generally speaking, afterwards, you feel better, less pain. So I went to the one of these massage clinics, and there's various types of massage, and just for your benefit, by way of explanation, some people dangle a crystal ball over your spine, total waste of time. Some people run a feather down your spine, never ever helped me. And some people are so gentle, they just don't have any effect at all. But there are other people, and they are very powerful with their thumbs, and they put pressure on you. And even if it's painful, it doesn't matter because it's very tolerable pain. And I actually tell them to press harder because it's the harder they press, the more benefit you get. And if they press too hard in a trigger point or something, I tell them, and then they will back away from that trigger point until eventually, after the procedure is finished, you go home and you generally have less pain in the muscles of your neck. So I've used them a reasonable number of times in the past, and I went there thinking they'd be able to fix this problem. Well, let me tell you, it didn't. But I'll tell you what happened. They used the same amount of pressure that I've had in the past, and when they hit certain trigger points, it was agonising. To such an extent that I could yell out, "Yow!" Now, the reason I do that is because, in my personal experience, if you yell, first of all, you're telling the guy he's hit a trigger point to back away a bit. You're not criticising him, you're just informing him that that's a bit of a sore spot. And the other reason is when you yell and let oxygen out of your mouth, it does seem to mitigate the pain. So that's why I do it. And so I'm not going to sit there and tolerate the pain quietly when I can get some relief in that manner. Now, he would have caused me to yell out in pain about 20 or 30 times. And I was started thinking, what are you keeping going for? You're scaring away your customers because I'm yelling out here 20 or 30 times. But he kept massaging my neck, and there were a couple of trigger points he frequently hit. And he'd run his thumbs with great pressure up along in between my shoulder blade and my spine and hit that trigger point. And, ow! It would hurt. And I'd let him know. And then there's another trigger point midway between my shoulder blade from left to right. And when he rubbed anywhere else, it didn't hurt. But when he hit that trigger point, it hurt. So there were also sore spots in the mid-neck region, in the actual vertebral column. And there were sore spots in other places as well. And at the end of it, I walked out of the clinic and it didn't make any difference to the pain at all. So I therefore thought, at some stage I'm going to have to go and see a doctor and see what's going on here. Now, there were a couple of other symptoms I had. And one was that in the first 2 centimetres of this finger, it was numb and tingly. And that's a typical symptom of a slipped disc, by the way. And sometimes it would radiate up to my wrist, and sometimes it would radiate all the way up to my shoulder. I also had an ache in the left side here, an annoying ache in this muscle that goes from the shoulder to the neck. Now, another feature is that 95% of these pains occurred on the left arm, left shoulder, and left back, etc. But about 5% of the time, and to less extent, less severe pain, occur in the right shoulder, right arm, and right hand. So at some stage I decided to consult a doctor. And when I consulted him, he's a friendly guy. My other doctor retired and his young bloke took over. And I said to him, what's going on, right? And explained all these symptoms, and he said, you've probably got a slipped disc in your neck. Now, just to explain to you, there's a lot of quibbling about whether the disc has slipped or not. The actual disc itself is between 2 vertebral bones in your neck, and in between each bone is a disc which is like a cushion, which enables you to move without damaging the bones. And it enables the spine to bend and left, right, and backwards and forwards, whereas you can't actually bend your arm bone or your leg bone. You can bend your spine because it's got all these joints in between the bones, and they are more or less cushions in between each bone. Now, these consist of a sort of a liquidy interior and a sort of cartilaginous or whatever outer rim. And so in between one bone and another is this disc. Now that disc doesn't actually slip out and in because it's attached. But sometimes you get a bit of a tear in the outer wall and a bit of fluid bulges out. And if it presses a nerve, that's what causes the pain and all the other symptoms. And if the pain is all on the left side, it's bulging out and pressing on the nerve to the left. It's a bit fluid, and so occasionally it might apply pressure to the right side as well. But in my case, it was 95% was to the left. When I explained this to my doctor, he said, hold your hand out like that. And I did. And he put his hand on it. He said, push up. So I did. And then he said, hold your other hand out like that. And he put his hand on top. And he said, push up. And he said, you've got weakness in the left arm, which is an indication you've probably got a slip disc with the bulge to the left. And weakness in the affected limb is also a characteristic feature. And I explained to him all the other symptoms, and I said I'm in agony, but you don't want to say too much like that to doctors because they think, you're whinging about nothing. He said, well, it's a bit of pain, doc. And so what can I do about it? And he said, nothing. And I thought, you gotta be joking. Here I am in pain, it's driving me up the bloody wall, and he says I do nothing. I said to him, if I've got a slip disc, why can't a surgeon push it back and sew it up? Well, it's just pretty well, it's not that simple. It's not like a broken bone in your leg or your arm. The actual mechanisms of your spine's a little bit more complicated than that. And he said, the only thing you can do is wait 6 weeks. And if you're lucky, the pain will go away. And if you're not, well, so if we do surgery now and the scalpel slips, you could have chronic incurable pain and nothing can fix it. Or if the scalpel slips, you could be paralysed and nothing can fix it. So the best thing to do is to let nature take its course, and in 6 weeks, if you're still in pain, then it's a time to consider surgery as a last resort. And sometimes that surgery is successful and sometimes it's not. So I thought, you got to be joking. I got to wait all that time putting up with this pain and there's nothing relieving it. Well, anyway, I said to him, can you arrange an x-ray or a CAT scan or something, find out, what's going on here? And so he arranged some appointments. And I said, also, in the past, I've had a little bit of benefit from physiotherapy. I generally don't get much benefit. The benefit to my various neck, back problems in the past have been due to massage, not physio. But I said, there may be some value in seeing a physio. So he made an appointment with a physio. Now, I subsequently went for an MRI, and that wasn't practical. It was too painful. Ultimately, I decided, I'm getting out of here, I'm going home, and I'll just keep suffering. And then I went for a walk, come back, ready to pick up my report and take it to the doctor. And I said, I will give you a CAT scan now. And that was a bit more tolerable, it's quicker, and so forth. So the net result was they did get some information. Basically, between C5 and C6, there's a number of problems with the bones and the vertebra and the disc itself. And while there was no clear indication of a slip disc, the report said that in all likelihood that's where the problem is. And so in between then I went to the physio. He's a nice guy, I've seen him before. He laid me on a sort of a bench and asked me to describe all the symptoms. So I did. And he said, you've probably got a slip disc between C5 and C6 as indicated by the numbness and tingling sensation in that particular finger and those symptoms and the symptoms at the back and the weakness in my arm as well. But he went into more detail than the doctor because I only saw the doctor for a few minutes, whereas I saw him for perhaps, I'm not sure it's a half an hour, an hour. And what he did was he got my head while I'm laying down on my belly and he pulled it forwards like that, very gently, because you can do some damage if you're too rough for the neck. And as he's doing that, I could feel the tingling sensation running up my arm or up my hand or my arm, and the numbness was affected like that. And sometimes he'd press on a part of my neck and it'd cause pain in my shoulder, etc. So he was able to confirm that diagnosis. And he gave me a number of instructions on what to do, exercise-wise and so forth. Didn't help at all. The time in his rooms provided some very temporary relief, because when I went out, I was still in pain. And so I had one session with him every week for 6 weeks. Now, this pain just kept going on and on and on. It was driving me up the wall. And the 6th week came and I'm still in pain. And the 7th week went by and I still had this pain. And I thought, I may have to arrange surgery. Now, I'm not fond of surgery either because, sometimes it solves the problem and sometimes you come out with another problem. So I wasn't going to race into surgery unless I absolutely have to, even though I was in a lot of pain. And there's a lot of things I was doing to try and relieve that pain myself, which I may discuss later. But by the 8th week, I think it's the 7th or 8th week, I noticed one day that maybe, I don't know what time it was, maybe 10 in the morning, I did keep a diary, but the pain seemed to ease off and I thought, you beauty, I'm going to be rid of this pain for good. And then it came back with a vengeance. And I thought, oh no. And then later in the week, the pain went away. And then it came back with a vengeance again, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life. I'm going to be in surgery soon. But towards the end of the week, these times when this pain seemed to ease off a little bit became more frequent. And by the end of the week, it went away, and it stayed away. And I thought, I am never going to lift anything like that again. I'm never going to walk back lifting an object at an awkward angle again. I don't want this pain coming back because doctors can't do a bloody thing about it. So it's up to me to make sure it never happens again. And then I still had a weakness in the neck. And that's basically because there has been an injury, and these slip disc type injuries, as they're called, popularly called, they never heal properly. So it says, and that's my experience. So to give you an example, about a week later, when I'm getting a bit of confidence in my neck again, being able to do things, I was vacuuming the carpet, and I was walking in a straight line with shoulders evenly spaced between the vacuum cleaner. Like I wasn't vacuum cleaning like this, right? So the next thing I did, I had to vacuum under a piece of furniture, and when I bent down, I could feel a weakness in my neck. I thought, uh-oh, that's the end of me doing the vacuum for 6 months. There's no way in the world I was going to risk getting that pain coming back because no one could do anything about it. Pills were useless and every other form of treatment useless. I wasn't going to risk it. So I just put the vacuum away for another few months. As you can appreciate, most times when you're doing things, you do stand correctly and you do put equal weight on equal arm, just as a matter of common sense. But every now and then, something needs to be done that's at an awkward angle. And occasionally I'd be doing something, I'd feel the weakness in my neck, I'd stop immediately. There's no way I'm going to do something that brings that pain back. Now that was about 5 years ago. And in that 5-year period, the strength in my neck has gradually improved. But there is still obviously a weakness that presents itself from time to time. So other than that, it's reasonably good and I don't get any significant pain. That's for 5 years. Let's hope that continues. Now, the reason that I'm giving this talk today is because I actually studied this problem. And I actually made some decisions. And it turns out they were the right ones. And I know that if I'd have made different decisions in what to do about this, I could have been in permanent pain. I would not have recovered. And the other reason is I invented the world's first standing computer desk, and other people are making billions of dollars out of it, not paying me royalties, and no one cares. I invented the pacing method for chronic fatigue syndrome, and other people making millions of dollars for themselves or their clinics or whatever. No one pays me. And other people diagnosed with chest pains and they don't pay me anything. I'm the one and only person who developed those ideas. And this slip disc, I've got ideas on how to make sure that doesn't become chronic pain and paralysis. If I was to tell you, it'd go viral and everybody in the world will be charging a fee for it and paying me nothing. So if you want me to tell you how I solved this problem of slip disc, and it wasn't just time, you also have to make the right decisions because some people make the wrong decisions and they come out with pain. And I can give some insight into that, but I want somebody like patients to show a bit of gratitude and make the manufacturer pay me 5% royalties for the desks they make. They're selling standing desks because of my theory, and they're making standing computer desks based on my methods to solve problems that help 300 million other people who have the same health problems as I did. And they're making all the profit and I'm getting nothing. And the same goes with my other methods. Pacing is used all around the world and people say, oh, it's something wrong with it. But every doctor's now saying pacing, pacing, pacing. In the past, they used to say run faster and faster and faster or you'll never get fit. So I will describe how what I did to prevent that slip disc injury from becoming incurable pain or paralysis. At some time in the future, if somebody decides to give me the credit for my ideas and some kind of payment, 5% royalty of a doctor's fee is only $1.75. I know people are paying $100 a week for pills. So what I'm doing is very, very economic research. So thank you for listening, and I'll end this video here. Thank you.